Do you know Fezz? They make tube electronics, and I have been admiring their amplifiers for years from afar. Now, I've heard them at shows. I've even heard it once or twice in someone's home, friend's home, and I've always liked what I heard. So when I had this chance to review this one, the Fezz Silver Luna Prestige integrated amplifier, of course I said yes. And I'm so glad I did. This is a beautiful amplifier. Now, it's interesting. Fezz is owned by another company called Toroidal that makes nothing but transformers. And tube amplifiers usually have output transformers and power transformers. So it's natural that Toroidal makes the transformers for Fezz designs. And not only that, since it's in-house, they can match exactly provide the transformers as needed for a specific design. Where most companies that make tube amplifiers, they have their transformers come from outside suppliers, and they do their best to pick the right one, or it might even be made to their spec by an outside supplier, but it's not as good, or it's potentially not as good, as having it done in-house. And I think that's one of the standout features of Fezz Electronics are their toroidal output transformers and toroidal power transformers. Hey, so this is a 35 watt per channel integrated amplifier. It uses push-pull EL34 tubes. Now what else? Oh, the driver tube is either a 12AX7 or a 6N2P. And when you change those tubes, you have to change a switch in the back, actually right there between the output transformers. And there's another switch there that lets you operate the EL34s in pentode mode or in tetrode mode. And I'll talk about that a little bit later in the review. There are a few options you can choose among when you buy this Fezz amplifier. You can decide whether or not you want a remote. I'm assuming most people will want the remote. Whether you want a subwoofer output, and Bluetooth. Bluetooth is actually an option on this amplifier, which kind of surprised me, but there it is. Now, my sample did not have the Bluetooth, and that's fine with me. But anyway, I do want to talk a little bit about the remote. The remote is a little plastic remote. It looks kind of cool, but it does feel rather plasticky. And my problem with the remote really is that it goes up and down. The volume control goes up and down way too fast. It's almost impossible for me to get it to be exactly where I want it to be. And that's kind of a drag. But the upside is the knob feel. Yeah, the Fezz's knob feel is really good. So getting up from my chair to go over and turn the volume up and down was no biggie. And the chassis is also really well crafted, all metal chassis. The details of the chassis are super nice for an amplifier of this price, which is $3,495. And that price, considering what you get for a European-made amplifier, is actually low. I think that is less than I would have thought it would be. So that's a huge plus. Now, being a tube amplifier, it does put out a lot of heat. But a lot of equivalent tube amplifiers do as well. But I'm just saying, if tubes are new to you, yeah, you don't want to put this amplifier inside an enclosed cabinet with the doors closed. That's not going to end well. So anyway, there's that. And there's also, yeah, the other option is a tube cage with I think it's glass front to it. So if you have young children or pets or anything, you'd probably want to get the tube cage. And the tube cage itself is a really cool looking design. It definitely feels right for the rest of the amplifier. Looking over the back panel, it's a pretty bare bones design. There's 3 sets of inputs, as I said, all analog, and 2 sets of binding posts, one for 8 ohm loads and one for 4 ohm loads. You should listen and decide for yourself which sounds best on your speakers. Or you can just use the one that matches your speakers. But I would recommend if you go that way, listen and decide for yourself. Let's look at the specifications, and I will mention also that there is a 2-year warranty. And also mention, by the way, that yeah, there's an Audiophiliac viewer system of the day later on in today's show. And I did something a little different this time for the viewer system in that I added some just pictures without commentary after I run the actual Audiophiliac viewer system of the day, there's some other things for you to look at. So check that out. We'll see how that flies. So, this amplifier arrived in a null where I didn't have anything else to review at that very moment. So I got to spend a little more time listening to it. And I used 3 different sets of speakers. I used the Pure Audio Project Duet 15, the Zoo Dirty Weekend 6, and also the Volti Razz. Now, I've reviewed all 3 of those speakers, and I will provide links so you can watch those reviews if you're unfamiliar with those designs. And the sound, well, my first impressions of the sound, which aren't my lasting impressions, but the way it sounded at first was, this is not a particularly tubey amplifier. It's not super warm, certainly not flabby. Its high end is extended. It's a very clear sounding amplifier, but it didn't really sound like a solid state amplifier. Oh, but the toggle switch to go between tetrode and pentode. Well, pentode is definitely what I did most of my listening with, and when I switched over to tetrode, the sound was definitely warmer and more, let's say, stereotypically tubey. It had a richer, fuller balance, which I love, by the way, on the Zoo Dirty Weekend 6. It definitely plumped up the Dirty Weekend a bit. But in the end, I preferred the pentode sound, and that's what almost all of my listening descriptions are based on, listening in pentode. So then I was in the mood for some reggae, and I played this contemporary band. They're called Stand High Patrol. It's reggae music, and they're reggae musicians, but it's based in France, Stand High Patrol. And I'm playing this recording, and it sounds really good, and the bass definition and clarity down there is extraordinary. And I'm playing this over the Pure Audio Project Duet 15s with 15-inch woofers, and I'm marveling at the definition and clarity of the sound. Like, this is not typical amplifier sound. It's not typical EL34 sound. It sounds really good. And 35 watts channel goes really far when you have a high sensitivity speaker like this, which I believe is 97 dB. So I was playing it pretty darn hard, shaking up the room, and I was having a good time with the Fezz. Then I'm playing this incredible Randy Newman LP. I'm pretty sure it was recorded in the 70s, meaning it's definitely all analog. It's a big production with him, of course, on piano, but strings and brass. It's big. But it's not overproduced. It's not too much. And at one point I closed my eyes, and I'm doing that thing where I feel like I can see Randy Newman. I can imagine Randy Newman. I could see his hands on the keys, and I just felt so connected to this music. And I'm thinking, damn, that's what this is really all about. Feeling that closeness to a recording that's over half a century old. And I'm there. The string, and that's the weird thing. Something usually that produced gets in the way of that immediacy, that live in the studio feel. But that's what I was getting from this recording. And then I decided to do a comparison between the Fezz and the Heaven 11 Billie. And that's a hybrid tube integrated amplifier. Hybrid meaning there's only tubes in the input stage, but the output is Class D. But even so, it's a pretty tubey sounding amplifier. And I'm playing this recording, a live recording of Randy Newman in a small club. It's called, or was called, The Bitter End, which I used to go to a lot. Unfortunately, I wasn't there for any of the Randy Newman shows. But anyway, it's a wonderful recording. He's so into it. He's really connecting with the audience. But Randy, is a little too loud in the mix, or to say it another way, the piano isn't loud enough in the mix. At least that's what I thought when I started this comparison with the Billie. I was really into the sound, but the mix issue was kind of distracting for me. So then I switched over to the Fezz. He seemed more connected to his piano. It was more of one, more like being there. Anyway, you feel the audience's connection with Randy in this recording. It's so great. He's really young. He's so excited that he actually has an audience in New York, no less. He's doing fine and playing this recording of a really good system, again, with the Pure Audio Project Duet 15s. It's an incredible document of a time long past. Now, I do have to say that the Heaven 11 was definitely pulling its weight. It had beauty. It had truth and beauty on its side, no doubt. But not compared to this one, not compared to the Fezz, where the Fezz just took me deeper into the recording. So then I was playing the Fezz with the Volti Razz horn speaker. And I was playing this recording by Niels Fromm, solo piano. It's a very special piano. It doesn't sound like any other piano. And you just hear more into the harmonics of the piano. Every hammer hitting the string is an event. You just hear all this sound coming off the piano that's floating in free space. It was absolutely extraordinary. And again, this is the kind of stuff that tubes do better than solid state in my experience. They just release the music in that way that it doesn't feel as stuck to the speakers. It just occupies the room. That's a beautiful thing. Then I played this Bjork record with the Dirty Weekend 6 and the Fezz. And it's electronic music. I guess it's kind of pop music. There's a lot going on. It's a dense recording, and there's some really deep bass action going on. And I gotta say, the Dirty Weekend 6 were giving me more than they usually do. It was a really great marriage. Matter of fact, I felt like the amp and speaker were making love to each other. It was so intense. And that was another one where I just kept turning it up louder and louder. And these are high sensitivity speakers. I think 91 or 2 or 3 dB sensitivity. But anyway, it was fantastic. I was having the best time. Okay, so the next thing on my agenda was to do another comparison, although I admit upfront an unfair comparison, between the linear tube audio microzonal preamplifier and then the separate ultralinear power amplifier. Now, each one of those individually costs more than the Fezz amplifier does. That's the unfair part, but the ultralinear is only 20 watts per channel. So in that sense, the Fezz had the advantage on that score, on the power score. And I'm playing this wonderful recording of Dr. John doing Walk on Gilded Splinters. Now, I love this record. I've been listening to it for forever. It just gets better and better. I never tire of Dr. John, especially in this period. And the thing is, the linear tube audio electronics were tubier. And that's interesting because the ultralinear amplifier is an output transformerless design. I mean, there's no output transformers, at least in the conventional sense. But yet, it was the warmer, lusher sounding device. The Fezz amplifier was faster and clearer and more transparent. But there was something about the way the linear tube audio stuff just sort of opens up the space, that thing of hearing around the instruments, all that sort of stuff. It does that better. It does. So in its own way, it's more transparent, but it wraps that transparency around a sweetness, a beauty that's just beguiling. The Fezz bass is definitely tighter, faster, and cleaner than the linear tube audio. So the point here is they're doing different things. It's a season to taste thing. What do you prefer is the question. And like I say, the Fezz is a fraction of the price of the LTA preamp and power amp. So it's not really a realistic comparison at all, but my choices of comparisons are limited. I don't always have everything on hand. But I will say this, that I recently had the Decware Sarah 300B, which is an integrated amp, which is sold for about $5,000 or so with tubes. So that was a fair comparison, except that the Sarah is only, well, less than 8 watts a channel is its total output. And even with high sensitivity speakers, and I can say this, it's recent enough I can make this mental comparison, even with speakers as high sensitivity as the Pure Audio Project, there's no comparison that the Fezz has the advantage here, that it could play louder, it was more dynamic, the bass was under greater control, but still there's some magic about the sound of 300Bs, that inner detail, that inner glow that the Fezz doesn't quite match. But in the overall contest, I would say the Fezz would win that battle, for most people. Of course, tastes vary, to say the least. I have to add one more thought about the Decware, and that is I hear from viewers, you guys, all the time, that tell me that you listen very quietly all the time. You never listen loud. Okay, if that's you, and let's say loud is anything over, let's say 80 dB, and you have high sensitivity speakers, then yeah, a low powered amplifier, an 8-watt amplifier, a 5-watt amplifier, might make a lot of sense. There are advantages to that. So more power isn't always the right solution. But if you are the kind of person that listens very quietly, or you have a very tiny room, you can't disturb your neighbors, or whatever it is, low power amplifiers definitely have their place. And by the way, Fezz makes some very nice low powered amplifiers, and I might even review one at some day. I think we're ready to do these. So Steve, what do you really think? What do you really think of the Fezz Silver Luna Prestige tube integrated amplifier? Well, the very first thing is it has that ideal balance between tube goodness, the warmth, the body, the soul, and yet at the same time, it does pretty well in terms of clarity and detail and resolution, all those things. It's like right in the sweet spot. That's a rare talent to be that exactly where I would want it if I was buying an amplifier like this. And then you throw in the fact that it is made in Poland. As I said earlier, the transformers are made in-house for Fezz. I think the price, at this price, $34.95, it's actually less than I would have guessed. So in that sense, it is definitely a value. Speaking of value, we're going to do the big part right now, the big finish, which is the Audiophiliac viewer system of the day. This is David's desktop DIY system. The amplifier is an L-Kit TU8200 with Lundell transformers and Jupiter condensing coupling caps. The speakers, Omega compact Alnico monitors, DAC Geshelli Labs 12 with the AKM DAC chipset, turntable, ooh yeah, a Dual 1218 with a HANA EH cartridge. Phono stage is a kit. It's the Bottlehead Eros 2 with a Soder step-up transformers and Jupiter condensing caps. David also selected a Shit Loki equalizer to boost the bass a bit. And there's a Glow Sub 1 subwoofer with a passive radiator. David removed the amplifier and replaced it with an outboard OSD Audio SMP 100 amplifier. Very nice. Thank you, David. All right, we are back. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and it's true. I am the Audiophiliac, and I am proud of it. That's a fact. You know what else is a fact? If you like what I'm doing here on the channel, would you please consider contributing to my Patreon? The address is on the screen right now. It's super easy to do. And do it for the reviews. Do it for the interviews. Do it for the HER videos, the Audiophiliac viewer systems of the day, and so much more, and the thought pieces that I do that I have so much fun with. Please consider joining the Patreon. And you could also just subscribe to the channel if you have yet to do so, and please remember to hit the like button for the videos that you like. And if you got this far into this video, I assume it's because you like it, or maybe you're sleeping. That's a possibility. But anyway, please remember to hit the like button. And with that, I can say my work here is at last complete. Thank you again for watching, and I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.